everyone, my name is Janet. Now let's dim the lights.
Oh, the horror!
Hey guys, welcome back to my channel where we talk about all things spooky, uninviting, and downright horrific. As usual, I don't take myself seriously. I hope that you don't either. I'm just here to provide lighthearted, digestible reviews, and if you are looking for something a little bit more critical and in-depth, there are channels that do that. I'm just not one of them. I just have to apologize for the level of noise in the background today because there is an ongoing construction project next door to us, and they're constantly drilling and sawing all day long. And it's also garbage day, so there's a garbage truck driving up and down the street. So I apologize for any distracting background noises, and I will do my best to get rid of those. Happy almost October. It's finally here. 'Tis the season to convince all of your friends who aren't so keen on horror movies to watch and do all the spooky things with you, because it is finally the month where it's generally accepted to do so. And I know a little bit about movie night debates with friends who hate horror movies because I have several myself, honestly. So I made just the list for that occasion. Today I'm going to talk about some of my personal favorite horror comedies. Black comedies, dark comedies, whatever you want to call them, horror movies that make you laugh. And to be clear, I am specifically talking about the subgenre of horror comedy. I know that I could probably do an entirely separate video on horror movies that unintentionally make you laugh, but today I'm talking about movies that are intended to make you laugh. I really want to reiterate that this is just a list of my favorites. In no way is it meant to be a list of the most well-rated or critically acclaimed horror comedies, if that's even a thing. And I also want to know what's on your list. So if you have a favorite that isn't on this list, leave a comment below because I would love to watch it. And also, if you have seen some of these movies, let me know what you think. Even though these are in no particular order, I am going to start with a film that is definitely in my top 3. I loved it way back in college, and it was always on rotation because it's just one that you can put on, and it's hysterical and adorable, and that is Tucker and Dale vs. Evil, which is a 2011 black comedy co-written and directed by Eli Craig. The film starts off with a group of friends who embark on a camping trip in West Virginia. There, they encounter Tucker and Dale, the film's protagonists, who, because of their rough exteriors and hillbilly lifestyles, are mistaken for the antagonists. Through a series of bloody misunderstandings, we are reminded of the age-old lesson not to judge a book by its cover. With no major names on the bill, the film facetiously presents itself as a low-budget, unoriginal horror film, when in reality, it's such a clever presentation of folie à deux between two equally deluded groups of people. I couldn't possibly recommend this one more. It blends horror and comedy so seamlessly and completely pokes fun at itself the entire way through. And if I can't convince you, it has a whopping 7.5 out of 10 on IMDb, which for a horror movie is incredible. On my personal rating scale, it definitely gets a 10 out of 10 because I just love it so much and it brings me so much joy every time I watch it. Tucker and Dale vs. Evil is available to rent on VOD. Next up is a film that features horror darling Justin Long, who probably is widely known for his comedy chops, but let us not forget that his first major starring role was in a horror classic, Jeepers Creepers. Since then, he has been absolutely killing it in the black comedy game, and that is why I'm here to talk about the 2014 movie Tusk, which was written and directed by Kevin Smith of Clerks fame. The film centers around an obnoxious podcaster named Wallace, played by Long, who flies to Canada to conduct an interview, only to find that said interview has fallen through. Frustrated that he's left without a story, he finds a flyer that beckons him to a mysterious mansion inhabited by an eccentric recluse, Howard, who begins to tell him an interesting tale. Soon enough, Wallace learns of his own integral role in the story's ending, but it may just be too late. Tusk is just one of the most bizarre, unsettling, and hilarious movies of all time. It's just so offbeat and so fucking weird that it completely blurs genre lines, and sometimes you don't really know if you're laughing because it's funny or if you're laughing because it's so disturbing that it's more of a nervous laughter coming out of you. It's just crazy in the best way. I don't know, it's hard to sum this one up, but I do promise you that you will be completely enthralled all the way through and that you've never seen anything like it. Also, Smith actually just announced that there will officially be a sequel to Tusk, which came out 8 years ago, and it's really exciting because I do believe that Justin Long is expected to make a comeback. I would easily give this one an 8 or a 9 out of 10, and Tusk is now available to watch on HBO Max. Moving on to a film that I'm sure most of you horror lovers have already seen and or maybe love as much as I do, it's 2011's Cabin in the Woods, directed by Drew Goddard and co-written by Goddard and Joss Whedon of Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Avengers fame. It is very similar to Tucker and Dale in the sense that it is slasher parody kind of masquerading as this tropey teenage horror film, so much so that its title alone defines an entire subcategory of horror films. The film centers around a group of 5 college kids who venture out to a remote cabin in the woods for a weekend of debauchery. Unbeknownst to them, this is no ordinary cabin in no ordinary woods, and they've just unwillingly signed up for the scientific experiment of a lifetime. Honestly, it's been a hot minute since I've seen this film, but I have not forgotten how fun it is. Mostly the monsters and the world that they built and the worlds within the world that they built. It's just fascinating. It does not surprise me at all that Whedon then moved on to Avengers pretty quickly after this. Cabin in the Woods deserves a strong 7 out of 10. Even though there are definitely movies on this list that are a little bit more well-baked than this one, it's so creative and such a worthwhile watch. The movie is now available to rent on VOD. Switching gears a little bit, we have Shaun of the Dead. This film is so quintessentially British, and that's a big reason why I love it. But it is also directed by Edgar Wright, who you may know from Scott Pilgrim and more recently Last Night in Soho, and is co-written by Wright and the film's lead actor, Simon Pegg, who I just adore so much. The film is the first in a trilogy, followed by 2007's Hot Fuzz and 2013's The World's End, which is another one of my absolute favorites. Shaun of the Dead features Shaun, played by Pegg, a downtrodden salesman with a lackluster job and a suffering personal life. With little to no prospects, he goes out with his best friend and wakes up in the morning to a zombie apocalypse. Determined to rescue his loved ones and make amends, Shaun and Pete battle their way through the undead to carry out their mission. As I mentioned, I just love anything and everything Simon Pegg. It's that endearing British thing that just gets me every time. And also him with Nick Frost, who is his cohort in this movie and several others. Their banter is just really special. I don't know, there's something amazing about their dynamic. In fact, I looked it up and they've been in 9 fucking movies together. That's how special it is. Love this movie. I'm not really a big zombie movie fan, and I know especially within the black comedy genre, it's been done a billion times over, but this one certainly tops it for me. It's just so witty, and what can I say? I love a good buddy movie. I give this one a 9 out of 10, and if you don't believe me, Shaun of the Dead is very well rated on the interwebs as well. It's now available to rent on VOD. We're going to keep the ball rolling with one that I just had to mention on this list, and that is the most quintessential teenage horror film of all time, Scream. Now, it might be a point of contention whether or not Scream is actually a comedy, but I would absolutely argue that it is. Scream is a 1996 slasher comedy directed by the legendary Wes Craven, and it's actually credited for bringing back the slasher genre in the 90s, which is a huge feat because if you know, slasher films in the 1990s and the 2000s were the bread and butter of the horror genre. Scream centers around a group of high schoolers who seem to be the target of an unidentified masked murderer in town. Sydney Prescott, played by Neve Campbell, finds herself in the center of the chaos and must uncover their identity and put an end to their killing spree before they put an end to her. I don't need to say much about this one because I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, have seen this movie by now, but what I will say is Scream is responsible for so many of the horror motifs that we know of today, and the one that I personally find myself screaming at the end of every horror movie is they always come back for one last scare.
Careful. This is the moment when the supposedly dead killer comes back to life for one last scare.
It's so hard to rate this movie because, as we all know, it's not the greatest movie of all time. But as I mentioned in the beginning, that is not what this video is about. Scream is one of the most prolific horror movies of all time and remained the highest grossing slasher film up until 2018 when Halloween came out. I feel like it would be sacrilegious to give this anything less than an 8 out of 10, so that is what I'm giving it. Scream is available to watch on Paramount Plus and Showtime and is also available to rent on VOD. The next film is the first of 3 mockumentaries on this list. It is Faking a Murderer, which came out pretty recently in 2020. And I'm gonna be honest, it probably has the most mixed reviews out of all the movies on this list, but I hope that doesn't dissuade you because I think it's such a good watch. And it is directed by Stuart Stone, who also co-stars in it along with his writer, Adam Rodness. Faking a Murderer centers around 2 budding filmmakers looking for a subject for their next project. They discover what seems to be a murder confession on YouTube and pitches the idea of an investigation to a production company who gives the project a green light. The 2 men follow the trail of breadcrumbs to what they hope will lead to a serial killer and a breakthrough in their careers, but at what expense? If you love true crime documentaries and or investigative found footage films like Creep or Blair Witch, you would probably enjoy this parodic take on both. Obviously, the title is a nod to Netflix's Making a Murderer, which was a real documentary, and they do cite that as well as a few other true crime documentaries as references for this film. This film provides plenty of laughs, and the on-screen chemistry between the filmmakers/actors is so convincing, probably because they are in fact real-life brothers-in-law. If you're looking for something light and amusing to put on, I would highly recommend Faking a Murderer. I would personally give it 6.5 out of 10. And the film is now streaming on a lot of platforms, including Prime, Vudu, and Tubi, I believe. Moving on to our next mockumentary, which is one of the wittiest movies of all time and skyrocketed the director's career up into the Marvel Universe. That is 2014's What We Do in the Shadows, which was produced, written, and directed by Taika Waititi. And it was so successful that its TV counterpart is now in its 4th season. And I'm gonna be honest, I've tried watching this show now several times over, and I don't know why I can't get into it. I mean, the comedy is exactly the same, but I don't know, something's missing for me. What We Do in the Shadows is a horror comedy mockumentary that stars Flight of the Conchords, Waititi, and Jermaine Clement as part of a group of vampire flatmates. We follow the group as they navigate through mundane daily tasks and interactions with the outside world and truly get an insider glimpse into the life of a modern bloodsucker. I know y'all have probably already seen this, so there isn't a whole lot that I need to say here, but it is one of the most clever and quotable movies of all time. It plays on all of those classic tropes and stereotypes of what a vampire is and plays them out in the most hysterical situations. And I think Waititi did such a good job of humanizing this classic horror villain. If you haven't already seen it, I highly suggest that you run, don't walk, to your TV set and put it on right now, because I would probably pay easily $500 to erase my memory of this film so I could watch it with fresh eyes. That's how amazing it is. So I would give this a 10 out of 10, obviously. And What We Do in the Shadows is now available to rent on VOD. The next one is a bit seasonally premature, but I had to throw it in this list. It is 2016's Better Watch Out, which is a Christmas black comedy, and it's directed and co-written by Chris Peckover. Better Watch Out stars Olivia de Jong as Ashley, a teenager paid to watch over young Levi Miller, who plays Luke, a 12-year-old with a major crush on his babysitter. As Ashley is busy fending off Luke's hopeless advances, they suddenly find themselves under siege by a violent intruder. As she must defend the house and protect Luke from danger, she quickly realizes this is no ordinary night on the job. If you know me, you know that I have a weird affinity for Christmas horror movies, and this is one that I watch every single year. The actors, even though they're super young, are so brilliantly talented, and there's so many fun plot twists throughout the movie. Better Watch Out is like Home Alone on ecstasy, and it is so much fun to watch, and probably a lot gorier than you would think considering it's starring children, which might be a bit of the draw for me, as fucked up as that sounds. I would give this movie an 8 out of 10, and Better Watch Out is available to stream on so many platforms right now. Whatever it is, whatever you have, it's probably on there. Peacock, Tubi, Vudu, all of those things, so you have no excuse not to watch it. Last but certainly not least, I have saved a great one for the end here. It is 2011's mockumentary, Grave Encounters, and I know that the horror community is probably a bit divided on this one, but I think that one, and by one I mean I, could argue that it is so bad that it's good. The film centers around Lance Preston, played by Shaun Rogerson, and his team of paranormal investigators who've arrived at an abandoned psychiatric hospital that is said to be haunted. They all lock themselves in the pitch-dark property for a night and at first Preston seems to be hamming it up for the cameras, but he quickly finds out that the rumors are indeed true and exaggeration is completely unnecessary. This film has a very special place in my heart because it's obviously a direct play off of the TV show Ghost Adventures, with Lance Preston being directly modeled off of Zach Baggins. And don't judge me for this, but I genuinely love Ghost Adventures so much, like not in an ironic, comical way, but I sincerely love it. Back in high school, we would all gather at my friend's house after school. Jordan, I'm talking about you if you're watching this. And we would just watch Ghost Adventures. And even now, I still wake up early on weekends and put it on the TV because it's kind of like a comfort show for me. But anyways, back to Grave Encounters. The reason I love this film so much is because it starts off as this comedic parody of a film and then shakes off its comedy coat halfway through and transitions into a purely horrific experience. I give it a 7 out of 10. I know it's not actually one of the greatest movies, but it's so much fun to me, and I do highly recommend, if you're watching this with your friends who hate horror movies, I'd give them a little bit of a heads up that it actually is pretty fucking scary. Otherwise, they might kind of hate you halfway through the film. And this movie is streaming also on like every single platform. And I'm guessing that the reason for this is every network and every streaming service is pushing Halloween. I know that every single one seems to have its own Halloween schedule. So take advantage of this time of the year and go out and watch all these movies that you'd normally have to rent or dig for. All right, that wraps up my very long video on a list of my favorite horror comedies, which two of my favorite things in the entire world. So this was a really special video for me. If you've stuck around this long, thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you liked it and you want to subscribe to it. See you next week.